Good afternoon on this Friday, December 8, 2023. I'm trying to record Global Thuggery Insights on Control, Terror, Torture, Targeting American Citizens. It is a book that I started reading for you guys. And oh, look what the criminals did to the corner. I guess they don't like my reading skills. Maybe they just don't like the book. Or maybe they're just losers. What do you think, guys? They like to destroy things? Yeah. So I'm going to continue on to number 29 is a toast to innocence. But before I get into it, my name is Lorraine, Alternative Homesteading. I moved from Manalapan, New Jersey, and a home I lived in for 30 years as the original owner and became targeted there. Moved to remote rural Kentucky, and the criminals are depraved lunatics here. Yes, they are. Very greedy, very depraved, very sadistic. So it doesn't matter where you move, folks. I've heard people move to other countries, like Brian too, and Janet Phelan, and so many others have moved to other countries and they still become targeted. But I have heard from other targeted people in the United States that Kentucky is particularly bad, and there are certain cities and states that are worse than others, and counties. But I'm going to move on to reading this book. Please hit the thumbs up. I appreciate your sharing this book. And let me just close the blind a little bit. I just noticed that the sun is in my eyes. Okay, that's much better. So this program is actually, it's vigilante, vendetta, vindictive. It's revenge for hire. Sometimes you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, or the wrong place at the right time. Sometimes you're nominated by an employer, an ex-boyfriend, an ex-wife, an ex-husband, a lawyer that you fired, a 501c3 nonprofit, feral cat rescue that brings in millions of dollars each year that doesn't actually rescue cats. Sometimes you can be targeted by those kinds of organizations. So it's all about narcissism, psychopathy, getting revenge, and doing it behind the scenes. Sort of like my neighbor said, oh, if you're targeted, I could do anything I want to you and get away with it. Now, who has that kind of a mindset? Not a good person, I'll tell you that much. The fact that somebody thinks that way tells you what they're about. So anyway, I'm going to read Global Thuggery Insights on Control by Terror, Torture, Targeting American Citizens by Corkin Cherubini. Okay, folks, here we go. A toast to innocence. And a toast to time. So sang Dan Fogelberg, an Old Lang Syne. In the story, a guy met his old lover at a grocery store. They talked and decided to continue the conversation in a nearby bar where they had a drink or two. Then they brought a six-pack, took it to the car, and reminisced some more. Plenty to talk about. Things like their marriages to an architect. But after a while, they ran out of conversation and probably beer. 3 or 4 replays later, loved that tune. My mind shouted, wait a second. Did that old lovers just demolish 4, 5, 6 beers and then drive off? Yeah, exactly. The way everyone in America did back in the 60s and 70s, before the repression began in the 80s. Today, a couple of beers, even one, might end up costing your job a fortune in attorney fees and maybe a prison sentence that begins the road to ruination, especially if you happen to be a target. I clearly recall that moment in my senior year in high school when 5 or 6 kids were parked on a country dead-end road. Everyone except me was trying out a rolling rock in one of those tiny green bottles. When the city cops suddenly appeared, the green glass glowed in the night. The cop was young and tall. He just looked at us for a few moments. Then he said to hand him every bottle in the car. Smart cop. I'm just interjecting that. Even though I had not had one molecule to drink, I began to see my life shattered at age 17. And at that point, I heard the sound of liquid pouring to the grounds. The cop poured it all out, never taking one taste. That's the way cops were back in the day. They did the right thing. That's right. What a great role model, right, guys? 3 felonies a day. That was in 1962. It was a time before our cities were deliberately flooded with hard drugs, before every average guy committed 3 felonies a day without even knowing it. See Harvey Silverglate's book, 3 Felonies a Day. Before massive mind control manipulation weaponry began destroying entire populations. See New World War by Mark Rich and How to Tame a Demon by Dr. Robert Duncan. 1962 was shortly after a time when one president, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, had warned us about the military-industrial complex, and when another president, John F. Kennedy, was taking tremendous strides to actually remove the dangers of a military-industrial complex that had gained total control of a once free nation. As a targeted whistleblower, I have experienced what has often seemed like, quote-unquote, police stalking. Yet, the many police officers I've spoken with lately have so far been more than professional. Contrary to many reports, these people have been quite human. In fact, I can equate these men and women with the officer who poured our beer on the ground, warning us, don't ever do that again. More than I could say for whoever is in charge of the COINTELPRO MKUltra gang stalking program. While I'm not in favor of texting and driving or drinking and driving or smoking and driving, neither am I favoring a fascist police state that has a legal system that assures we will commit 3 felonies per day. Please note, this incident actually happened. 4 other witnesses who are probably still alive can verify it. Still thankful for the many good cops who steered us in the right direction without ruining our lives. Likewise, I'm thankful for the many good parents who strive to raise good kids. But most of all, I'm thankful for those Americans who take the initiative to expose how the military-industrial corporate complex has all but destroyed our democracy. Because with this knowledge, good Americans can achieve greatness by pulling out of the chokehold. Chapter 30, Ohio, 4 dead. This is a quote by Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young in 1970. Tin soldiers and Nixon coming. We're finally on our own. This summer I hear the drumming. 4 dead in Ohio. Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, 4 dead in Ohio. Ohio helped to immortalize one of the most important anti-war incidences the world has known. Our own military killing 4 innocent college students was shocking beyond belief. The news media did its part. College kids around the globe did their parts. But was anything really learned from these untimely deaths and the furor that followed? At first, for almost 2 decades, I thought we had enough senseless murder in Vietnam to last us maybe forever. But within 24 years, we had already begun the wholesale slaughter of innocents in the Middle East. Many, especially those who could recall the words to 4 dead in Ohio, were disgusted and disillusioned again at seeing our own country rev up for more mass slaughter. Non-stop slaughter. Many dissented actively with letters, songs, peace marches, and rallies, but they, quote-unquote, had learned something. The huge war machine had learned from the carnage in Ohio. They, quote-unquote, remembered well that they were not going to let pictures of U.S. troops murdering innocent Americans ever be shown in America's homes again. Gang, quote-unquote, stalking roots. Not too many years before Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young were recording 4 dead in Ohio, the FBI had developed COINTELPRO as a means of controlling activists and dissenters. The program was based partially on the East German Stasi, a military police state program that was covert and knew no rules. The program also adopted tactics used by U.S. intervention forces. The original COINTELPRO was like a Sunday school picnic compared to what gang stalking is today, according to Ted Gunderson. COINTELPRO was supposedly dismantled in the 1970s, but FBI whistleblower Ted Gunderson tells us that it just became ever more covert. And in the 1980s, it assumed the name gang stalking. So there you go, folks. Why is it called gang, quote-unquote, stalking? It assumed that name in 1980. Okay, 1980, it was called gang stalking instead of COINTELPRO. There you have it. Gang stalking is to a large degree what amounts to a government torture murder program that is complex, high-tech, and inhumane. I'm going to repeat that. It became called gang stalking. COINTELPRO was renamed gang stalking in 1980. It's to a large degree what amounts to a government torture murder program that is complex, high-tech, and inhumane. Crush any dissent. Yeah, they learned well from the Ohio fiasco. Crush any dissent quietly and thoroughly. And so far, gang stalking has worked well for them. They muzzle the media. They operate covertly. They target specific individuals, too often whistleblowers, dissenters, artists, musicians, writers, protesters, and activists, and put them into a lifelong program of extreme torture. Many victims commit suicide in a matter of days. Some survive for years, but usually with extreme health problems resulting from the chemicals, drugs, and directed microwave energy used on them. Most of the inhumane torture tactics are those banned. You hear this? They are banned for any type of warfare, yet they're used upon writers, activists, musicians, artists. Oh, yes. I need to add in the name of national security because, musicians and artists, activists, wow, they're really a threat to national security, huh? The little weenies, they don't like artists, musicians, they don't like art. Well, look at what they did to Adrena, that lovely, gorgeous woman who was in her, I believe, early 40s. They don't like creativity. Establishment learns from Kent State fiasco. Yes, the establishment really learned from Kent State murders. Keep it covert, involve all government entities, vilify every target in order to totally isolate the person, ruin, destroy, and thoroughly eradicate every single victim. Thousands, perhaps millions of Americans have been murdered as a result of this and similar programs, and yet there's not one single demonstration or nationwide day of mourning. Weeks-long news coverage or even a Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young song played regularly by major radio stations across the nation. Rather, the suffering and the dead are victims of a silent, secret Holocaust. I mourn for all those who fall victim to this atrocity. Thanks to Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, a responsive 1970 media, and a small segment of the American population that risked their own lives to decry murder. Turning the page here, they got stuck together, folks. Paragraph 31, existential. Beginning in the 1980s, a squadron of drivers in any city I went to would have crap happens bumper stickers. Many of these drivers used a synonym for crap, C-R-A-P. Usually they would pass fast, their revs sounding over a red line. Once slightly ahead of me, they would slow down to my speed so I could better read the "crap happens" message. I now realize the identical tactic has been used repeatedly, but with different themes, as we careened towards becoming targeted in a program called gang stalking. Conceivably, the "crap happens" message would be a form of media programming. Brainwash victims by showing enough "crap happens" messages, and that's what they will believe. They'll believe that just stuff happens. Many most unlikely events began occurring almost every day. Floods, tornadic winds, vermin infestations, talented honey traps, and too much more to mention. The message etched upon the bumpers of so many vehicles was almost comforting. Crap happens. It happens. The programming, brainwashing, was working quite well on me when a couple of trees crushed my motor home and 2 cars. They were the only trees to go down in the whole tree-filled neighborhood. Oh my goodness, guys. This happens to me too. Does it happen to you? That you're the only one in the neighborhood that has trees go down in the middle of nowhere? Yeah. Things really do happen, don't they? What I didn't realize at the time was they often happen twice, or even more. Falling trees must be a favorite covert tactic. Oh, yes, they got rid of all my trees in Manalapan, New Jersey, and they're doing it here, too. Only a few weeks ago, March 2020, one large but altogether healthy tree, healthy trees, landed on top of 3 vehicles and part of our house, even though there was no wind. Prior to that event, a mini burst took out 13 large, healthy trees on a lakefront residence. Recently, I read some existentialist philosophy that explained how we are not in control of our own destiny, that fate or someone, more likely someone, will intervene and send you packing in whatever direction they have chosen for you. Of course, they want us to believe that it's just crap happening. No intervention, no manipulation, no orchestration going on here. Just a lot of coincidence. Accidents and disasters and tons of other happening crap. Philosophy is profound. After reading a few pages of existentialism, I decided to try a bit harder to cut through the crap and gain some total control of my life. Sure. Have you ever tried going up against the MK Ultra controllers? The CIA and COINTELPRO controllers, the FBI, and the gang stalkers, possibly military and everyone they control? These groups, especially the CIA, says writer and insider Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty, control everyone. And everyone includes the controlled media, and most of it is very controlled, and in my opinion, that of many others. Congress, the American police state authorities, the justice system, all branches, agencies, bureaus, departments, offices of government, and most of our citizenry to various degrees. Chapter 32, School to Prison Pipeline. What do you think about the new prison, Doc? Victor was the only student in the room. He was not the type to enjoy pandemonium in the hall. It was several minutes before homeroom, and I was just a few feet away straightening rows of desks. I could see that Victor was serious, as usual. His was a seriousness that didn't blend with noisome joking and jiving around in the hallways. I was glad to see him so voluble for a change and answered, "Overall, Vic, I have to admit that it might be a plus for our county. At first, I was just dismayed with the prospect. But when you consider the jobs and revenue a prison would bring in..." "Jobs?" Victor was out of his chair and backed up against a puke green wall. "There's only one thing they're building that prison for, and that's to send us straight over there as soon as we get our diplomas from this prison of a school. And you know that's true." I did not know that was true and suggested that Victor to try to adjust his attitude. The entire conversation made me very uncomfortable. Maybe because I sensed that it was edged with barbed wire or razor wire. Surely Victor was wrong. For part of a dictate, I was smugly firm in the conviction that Victor was wrong. After all, the news was rife with reports of the huge new prisons going up all over America. And not just super security state federal pens, but hundreds of concentration type camps called FEMA detention centers, as well as plans for a quick renovation of almost all buildings or basements or grassy plain to house millions more. Very little in the media mentioned the question of why we might need all these prisons. Seldom did it mention the little publicized fact that for decades, America has held the #1 spot for incarceration of human beings by a ridiculous margin. That's right, folks. That's actually in the world. Yep, in the world. Still, none of this news struck me as grossly conspiratorial. Rather, the opposite. Every monstrously huge prison complex means jobs. School to prison pipeline. At some unknown point, I heard the phrase school to prison pipeline and maybe thought about Victor's words. Then again and again, the school to prison phrase was repeated, maybe not by the mainstream media, however. By that time, I had given up on the mainstream media. Instead, there were entire books out there on the topic. Sadly, there's a type of imprisonment that is just as inhumane. Let me turn the page here. Just as inhumane as visible high security prisons or FEMA camp, the electronic prison. Inhumane, deadly, and invisible. It is covert, a well-kept secret from the masses. It can easily incarcerate or assassinate many millions of citizens per year or month or week. The electronic prison controllers know every move, every word, possibly every thought their prisoners, i.e. targets, have by using high-tech surveillance in the worst possible way. Oh, I guess they don't like my reading this book, which is why they folded the page back, the cover back. If the truth hurts. That's right. It's not only revenge for hire, folks. Wait, guys, shh. It's a secret. We're not supposed to talk about it. Oh, no. We're not supposed to talk. It's a secret. Well, I guess the cat's out of the bag. The electronic prison controllers know every move, every word, possibly every thought their prisoners or targets have been using, with high-tech surveillance in the worst possible way. An entirely new era of torture is an integral part of the electronic prison, which employs radio frequency beams, along with microchips, to create remote torture that is, for the moment, inconceivable to most people. If the victims are still alive after the worst of the torture, the electronic prison officials can assassinate them in seconds, or they can program or control these victims to commit suicide or mass murder. Oh, they're such lovely creatures. You know, guys, they're all going to rot in hell, right? You know where they're going. Because we are the protected ones. They can do whatever they want. They're demons. They're the devil. They're Satan. And we are the chosen ones. Unfortunately, yeah, we're chosen. Apologies to Victor. My sincerest apology to Victor. Yes, I was the boss of my puke green room, but a leader with a closed mind can be less than helpful to greater humanity. Sadly, we have too few victors in our world today. They're being taken away from us at an unimaginable rate. Our would-be saviors are murdered at an astounding rate, or perhaps placed into an electronic prison so the ultra-pathologicals can have their way with them. Oh, I love that. The ultra-pathologicals can have their way with them. Oh, here we go, guys. Chapter 33 has got to be a good one. Chapter 33 at 3 a.m. Oh my God, what a coincidence. Let me have about me men as sleep o' nights. Julius Caesar, Act 1. Waking at 3 a.m., I lay thinking until dawn and first coffee. Not one night, not two, not three, but every night. One such night, thoughts framed themselves poetically. Nearby lay a pad and a pen, and with pulsing rhythm driving my thoughts, liquid hot ink spilled onto chill, empty pages in climactic frenzy, till cold and hot forged a literary bond. The theme, love and respect for kids, I taught, except that Tyrone, whose anger terrorized teachers. I wanted them to overcome the hand society has dealt. I was trying to help them, yet what could I do? I wish I knew. 4 o'clock, 4 more hours, and they would flood by. Turn the page here, guys. Just like yesterday, but different. Hey, man, what's wrong? I wanted to ask, though I know the answer. Instead, I'd launch into my Horatio Alger spiel. You guys can do anything you want. The sky's the limit. Apply yourselves and get some goals, and you'll win big. Hey, man, Alonzo responds, why are you preaching that crap? You know what it's about. You know how it works, man. Few months from now, they hand us attendance diplomas. Useless papers paving a path to that prison camp down the road. I glare at him, realizing his street society smarts outstripped my own. Trickle down was the new economics. And as the name implies, big boys get an ocean, leaving a few drops trickling through dikes and water walls. My kids knew trickle down. They'd been born to trickle down. I try again. Before we begin diagramming clauses and particles, let me remind you, in our free and equal society with a real endeavor, you can do anything you desire. At 5 o'clock, I make more coffee. I sip and think. I think of young adults playing a life and death game with decks loaded against them, loaded by bankers, politicians, corporate boards, a military-industrial complex, an atomic energy commission, the town bosses, the neocons, self-serving, self-perpetuating institutions, pure profiteers, poisonous food, water, air. The list winds on in my mind. Then I doze 20 minutes, only to be awakened by the alarm signaling another chance to make a difference. Chapter 34, 2 schools. 1994, 8 p.m., or maybe 9 p.m. It was dark outside my large square office, alone, tired, confused, ready to give up and go home. Not my job. More like that of a curriculum director, or an assistant superintendent, or maybe a counselor. I looked through a last thick folder, glanced at it, threw it down, ready to leave. But something riveted my eyes to the page. The page seemed to glow under harsh fluorescent light. Names and sections matched for 2 years perfectly. Digging deeper, another year. And the next hour, a huge conference table was full of stacks of folders that would be evidence. First, shocking, dozens of major media reporters and educators, and then the world. Clearly, most African American students had been relegated in kindergarten and first grade to lower level sections and left there from entry to kindergarten through grade 12. Practically no change occurred in the sectioning. Test scores were supposedly used for kindergarten placement, but there were no test scores. Weeks later, after meetings with the State Department and attorneys, I recommended a gradual change, one that would, over several years, make the county's public schools fairer and legal. fervor developed immediately, however. Most of it came from those in the power structure. Many, including this writer, were surprised that much of the reaction seemed hardly removed from forced integration of the 50s and 60s, which is rather understandable. Yet, always, I felt a dark foreboding that a monstrous machine was grinding, gnawing, ready to swallow any effort to change the status quo. For a tiny rural county with no obvious link to national or even state political power, the dark machinery of that power structure was far too oppressive. But more than that, it was far too well organized. My office sat an hour and minutes from the infamous School for Assassins, which is the School of Americas. Could that proximity have any relationship to the strange pattern of incidents that seemed to be developing, the nonstop biochemical attacks on me and my office staff? Or the strange incidents, accidents, and coincidences my family and I were experiencing? What was happening was so well organized that I sensed that powerful perpetrators were many times more devious than I had ever known the locals to be during the previous quarter of a century. Still, what I knew about organized crime would fit into a short paragraph. Unfortunately, it would be almost 2 decades before I would hear about organized gang stalking. But they had apparently heard about me. Media involvement. The mainstream media of 1994 to 1995 was superb. Many papers did attempt to clarify the situation, thus providing the meager protection of a spotlight. The power structure was not pleased. Numerous threats and incidents began happening to my family and me. Federal assistance for restructuring was available, and that helped, so it seemed, for a while. Federal assistance personnel appeared ecstatic that a large problem area in public education was getting badly needed attention. However, as soon as the really dastardly and deadly covert offensive was firmly in place, the general populace knew better than to be in my presence. The almost single exception was a few leaders from the African American community. Even though they were downtrodden and persecuted, the African American community remained loyal, though their own situation was even worse than I could imagine. It had occurred to me earlier that a whistleblower's most important ally is often a fair and honest media. I took a chance on their fairness and honesty, and the first major interviewer spent most of 2 days talking with those opposing change. They're all saying the same thing. There's no real problem except that you are nosing into matters that you should not be. They all use exactly the same words. The reporter looked at me, but no answer was forthcoming. His article was superb, lengthy but captivating and informative. Other big media saw the article and immediately began calling and calling. As major features went from smaller papers to state and national papers, such as the Miami Herald, Atlanta Constitution, San Francisco Chronicle, it took only a few weeks or days before the New York Times, Chicago Tribune, and LA Times had full-blown features. Interviews were strenuous, and after 1 or 2 more, I felt the spotlight on hard tracking at its worst. I had no doubt enlightened the public. Additionally, a spotlight on the whistleblower and those supportive can save lives. I determined no more media. Days later, though, one of the support team encouraged me to do an early morning show that was nationally broadcast, so I did. Suddenly, an avalanche of media wanted to interview me. Nationally, I was becoming larger than life. Locally, the power structure was at work. The media was a mixed blessing. I set firm limits. Then, a national news film crew said that the support team wanted to let teachers vote about allowing campus visits. I checked, not quite believing. Yes, the support team said, we did suggest allowing a faculty vote. I could not imagine a yes vote, so I did not worry. I should have. The faculty voted an overwhelming yes. I was surprised, but decided the vote was a sign suggesting that public awareness of hard tracking was indeed positive. But many weeks later, I understood why the yes vote. At that point, I had never heard of workplace mobbing, a term often associated with organized gang stalking. It refers to harassment of a worker by several or many fellow workers. I am fairly sure that most of the staff meant no ill intent, but I admit I was taken aback at what the entire nation was seeing. By June 1996, the media had vanished. It was as if a force from above had sent memos to end the coverage. With the media gone, I thought there would be some relief. Some, perhaps. Clandestine forces. Many times I have thought about JFK and other great leaders, all taken by covert operatives. According to many expert researchers, operatives who were never punished. You hear that? Operatives that were never punished. Rather, they garnered more and more power, and every successive evil deed is carried out with impunity. The social scene my family and I experienced was not unlike 1954 America, where integration was being mandated. I had heard the snarls, seen the steely eyes. 40 years later, I was hearing and seeing the same attitudes. By then, isolation, another gang-stalking requisite, was complete. Even the most loyal quote-unquote friends were staying out of my office and sight. Best for all. Earlier, I had realized there would be no reconciling ever. I had already thought about giving up another term of office. It would mean a huge salary loss, and likely forever being quote-unquote blacklisted, which is another gang-stalking surety. But the safety of my family was imperative. We would move to an area far away from the KKK mindset that I was being told was responsible for what was happening. In retrospect, and after learning about COINTELPRO-type organized gang stalking, it is clear to this writer that the talk of KKK was mostly to muddy the water so that covert forces, infinitely more powerful, could continue insidious operations in the dark shadows. Operations that include terror, torture, and ruination or termination for a targeted individual and family. Organized gang, quote-unquote, stalking. Organized gang stalking relies heavily on psychological operations, or PSYOPs. I would not hear about gang stalking or COINTELPRO or MKUltra for another 14 years. Though these covert programs had been in place for half a century. It took activists breaking into an FBI office and showing documents to reporters to even bring these programs to some small level of public attention. As I mentioned, I knew nothing about such covert programs, so I continued to think the harassment and potentially lethal tricks that we endured were actions by irate local citizens. Some of the locals must have known what was going on, for they would whisper, "You don't even know what they've got planned for you," or "You can't even imagine what's in store for you." No. I could imagine. Neither the adversaries nor their agenda. Adversaries with tentacles spread throughout our country and world. Adversaries using high-tech weaponry on their targets in a program reminiscent of an older classic KKK terrorism, neo and classic Nazi techniques and tactics of militarized vigilante and law enforcement groups. Adversaries operating in the shadows and manipulating others to do their dirty work. Yep. In 1996 and early 1977, I could not begin to imagine the scope of influence such a shadowy group of adversaries possessed. Chapter 35, The Setup, Part 1. And I'll probably stop after this, folks. We should have known, but ignored the clues. We chose ignorance, and so it spread. It spread and spread. No one objected. No one raised a voice. No one raised a hand. Instead, we fondled our phones, blind to evil spreading before our eyes. Our beloved cell phones betrayed our every thought, our every word, our every move. How could we see or even believe actions hidden from view? Dirty deeds done in darkness. In time we suspected but could not prove the source of covert damage. Cloaked thugs surveil us. They pervert our world. Yet should we attempt to peer beneath their cloaks? We're labeled terrorists who must be targeted. Coverts have agreed that should we be born in the Middle East of things, our lives may span but a few short years or months or days. We who remain must obediently follow orders handed down from above. In childhood, they mold us to be well-disciplined. Parents must not condone childish actions from energetic offspring. Teachers must discourage activist endeavors, and if we resist at age 5 or 10 or 20, we must quietly consume some sedated drugs to combat quote-unquote perceived disabilities. Always they say, wear a state-approved mask. Always they say, maintain that 6-foot social distance. Always they say, take your obedience, jabby-wabby. I can't say the word. And if we resist, we're arrested or fined for ignoring a senseless rule, or suffer till pain locks down our brains. Thus we're zombified, our questioning stifled, creative production prohibited, constructive action blocked, no gazing out windows, no daydreaming, no unsuitable socializing. Embrace the lockstep behavior touted by our masters. We should have known. Chapter 36, The Setup, Part 2. If you were to visit an elementary or preschool uninvited or unannounced, as this writer did, you might notice small children standing unattended in hallways beside closed classroom doors. Why are these tiny children being isolated from their classes? I asked the school administrator. Probably because they acted up. Disruptive kids need to be isolated from the good kids, I was told. Oh, but I thought truly disruptive students were given drugs like Ritalin to, tone down their energy level, improve their concentration, turn them into better students. The problem is the kids don't usually get half the drugs that we issue. Their parents are taking them. That's right, folks. Oh, yeah, I could tell you lots of stories about that one. The parents take them. They take their own kids' drugs to get high on. Suddenly, our medical industries, our schools, and society in general seemed more oppressive. I looked back at one of the small students looking hard at the floor. Was she a meth addict at age 6 or 7? One who had to share her drug allotment with parents? Didn't these parents realize they might be helping their own children become a daydreamer who looked out of classroom windows when she should have been paying strict attention to the lesson? Other thoughts buzzed through my mind. Were the parents addicted as well? If the drugs to children were given were what is commonly known as a cousin to meth or speed, wouldn't both the parents and the children be ingesting a very harmful, poisonous substance? Yeah. Yes, it is. It's an addictive substance. Yes. I looked at my old copy of The Pill Book. It said that chronic or abusive use of Ritalin could cause addiction and psychotic episodes. Side effects could include loss of appetite, skin rash, and changes in blood pressure. Oh, it's worse than that. In an article about psychiatrists drugging children, John Rappaport said that drugs like Ritalin could cause hallucinations, convulsions, extreme withdrawal from others, aggressiveness, and psychic dependence. A third source, Invisible Eugenics by Mark M. Rich, maintains that methylphenidate, Ritalin, and a methamphetamine are very similar in structure to cocaine. Yes, it is very similar in structure to cocaine, which was removed from Coca-Cola and cough medicine back in the days for a reason. These drugs cause damage to developing brains, especially atrophy, shrunken blood vessels that limit the amount of oxygen and glucose the brain receives. Not only can the drug cause mental and emotional disorders and destroy the user's self-esteem, it may cause cancer, arthritis, and heart abnormalities. Rich believes that chemicals like Ritalin, as well as those appearing in the Jabby Wabbies, are being used on children as weapons. They are promoted by those who fear exposure and loss of control over the creation of a utopian society. And I just need to add something, folks. It also causes early baldness in boys, small testicles, low sperm count, hypersexuality, which is why you hear more about young people doing the dirty with young people, because anybody that knows anybody that has done a little bit of cocaine, it makes you a little bit horny, and they're doing this to children who do not have the emotional intelligence to know what to do with that energy. Eugenics plays a major role in their plan. Eliminate the weak and uncontrollable, one way or another. The words of a noted educator and writer, John T. Gatto, written in 1992, are appropriate a quarter of a century later. He says, schools were designed to be instruments of the scientific management of a mass population whose behavior can be predicted and controlled. Page 26 of his book. A multi-pronged approach has been used to manage the masses for at least a half a century. Not only have drugs been used to shape thoughts and behavior, schools play a major role. Other institutions, including churches, social, political, and humanitarian organizations, prisons, the media, the government itself, are equally as important in shaping the public's view to coincide with the views of the controllers. Research has yielded a plethora of weaponry that can shape attitudes, behaviors, and thoughts of individuals or groups targeted by the controllers. Guys, I'm just telling you, the controllers? Do you know that there's something wrong with somebody else thinking that they control somebody else? It usually means that they have no control over their own selves. For anyone who has been targeted by covert forces, it becomes obvious that the weaponry for covert assassination is essentially infinite. From Stone Age nightsticks to complex mind ruination, it is theirs. The goal seems to be ultimate control of the human mind, and if that fails, then the new weaponry can be used to cause fatal illness or fatal accidents, especially to those who question conformity to their view of the world and revolt against it. It is theirs. The U.S. government is beyond repair. It is theirs. There's absolutely no effective procedural remedy within the system itself, Mark Rich says in his Invisible Eugenics book, page 280. It is theirs. So it appears it really is too late. Their citizenry, sheep and ostriches, gave them the keys to America's soul and slept. A paragraph later, Rich says that we can still hope. He believes that those of us who drew a total blank about out-of-control black operations issues 5 years ago are now waking up. We need only to revisit the 1930s and 40s history of Germany or the history of America since 1963 to understand that doing nothing is the worst possible option. We are all targeted beings. Dr. Ronnie Kildee has told us if one tactic doesn't get us, they have an endless supply to render us docile and obedient from the first school days to our early graves. We are all set up at birth, or even earlier. Well, is that sinister plot? The plot thickens, boys and girls, men and women. I'm going to stop here because I'm going to have to get my birdies into bed. I can see the sun is going down here, and we're at 51 minutes. So I hope you enjoyed that. I'm completing now on page 121. The next chapter is 37. Please leave your comments down below. I look forward to hearing what you have to say about these few chapters. So these people are sinister. So they've been watching us from birth or earlier? Oh, you mean they've been watching me gestate in my mommy's womb? Oh, well, maybe they were watching when my parents did it. Maybe they watched the sperm meet the egg and decided if I was going to be a boy or a girl. Now that would be total control, wouldn't it? That's totally sick and depraved. But hey, the lunatics are running the asylum. They're psychopaths. So this is Lorraine Alternative Homesteading. I hope you enjoyed the book, Global Thuggery, Insights on Control by Terror, Torture, Targeting American Citizens. Here it is. And remember, guys, it's a secret. Shh, it's a secret. We're not supposed to know what they're doing. Here's the book, guys. Here it is. Global Thuggery, Insights on Control by Terror, Torture, Targeting American Citizens. And you know what? Don't stay quiet. Please share this video. And thank you. I saw so many people sharing this book on their channel. So here's another one. 53 minutes and rolling. This is Lorraine Alternative Homesteading, signing off for now. And remember also, guys, it's not just about control. It's also for this. And it's also about the money. It's not just control. It's about money. How they can make money off of us. Signing off for now.